KaraokeBooks.
Pudd'nhead Wilson. Written by Mark Twain. Audiobook. Chapter 9. Tom practices sycophancy. Why is it that we rejoice at a birth and grieve at a funeral? It is because we are not the person involved. Pudd'nhead Wilson's calendar. It is easy to find fault, if one has that disposition. There was once a man who, not being able to find any other fault with his coal, complained that there were too many prehistoric toads in it. Pudd'nhead Wilson's calendar. Tom flung himself on the sofa, and put his throbbing head in his hands, and rested his elbows on his knees. He rocked himself back and forth and moaned. "I've knelt to a nigger wench," he muttered. "I thought I had struck the deepest depths of degradation before, but oh, dear, it was nothing to this. Well, there is one consolation, such as it is. I've struck bottom this time, there's nothing lower." But that was a hasty conclusion. At 10 that night he climbed the ladder in the haunted house, pale, weak, and wretched. Roxy was standing in the door of one of the rooms, waiting, for she had heard him. This was a 2-story log house which had acquired the reputation a few years ago of being haunted, and that was the end of its usefulness. Nobody would live in it afterward, or go near it by night, and most people even gave it a wide berth in the daytime. As it had no competition, it was called the haunted house. It was getting crazy and ruinous now, from long neglect. It stood 300 yards beyond Pudd'nhead Wilson's house, with nothing between but vacancy. It was the last house in the town at that end. Tom followed Roxy into the room. She had a pile of clean straw in the corner for a bed. Some cheap but well-kept clothing was hanging on the wall. There was a tin lantern freckling the floor with little spots of light, and there were various soap and candle boxes scattered about, which served for chairs. The two sat down. Roxy said, "Now Den, I'll tell you straight off, and I'll begin to calake de money later on. I ain't in no hurry. What does you reckon I's gwine to tell you?" "Well, oh, Roxy, don't make it too hard for me. Come right out and tell me you've found out somehow what a shape I'm in on account of dissipation and foolishness." "Disposition and foolishness? No sir, dat ain't it. Dat just ain't nothin' at all, 'longside o' what I knows." Tom stared at her, and said, "Why, Roxy, what do you mean?" She rose, and gloomed above him like a fate. "I means dis, and it's de Lord's truth. You ain't no more kin to ol' Marse Driscoll den I is. Dat's what I means," and her eyes flamed with triumph. "What? Yassir, en dat ain't all. You's a nigger. Born a nigger and a slave. En you's a nigger and a slave dis minute. En if I opens my mouth ol' Marse Driscoll'll sell you down de river befo'. You is 2 days older den what you is now. It's a thundering lie, you miserable old blatherskite. It ain't no lie, nuther. It's just de truth, and nothin' but de truth, so heap me. Yassir, you's my son. You devil. En dat boy dat you's been a kickin' and a cuffin' today is Percy Driscoll's son en yo, marster. You beast. En his name is Tom Driscoll, en yo's name's Valet de Chambers, en you ain't got no fambly name. Becca C. niggers don't have em." Tom sprang up and seized a billet of wood and raised it, but his mother only laughed at him, and said, "Set down, you pup. Does you think you kin skyer me? It ain't in you, nor de likes of you. I reckon you'd shoot me in de back, maybe, if you got a chance, for dat's just yo, style. I knows you, through and through, but I don't mind gettin' killed. Becca see all dis as down in written and it's in safe hands, too. And de man dat's got it knows wha to look for de right man when I gets killed. Oh, bless yo, soul, if you puts yo, mother up for as big a fool as you is, you's pow'ful mistaken, I kin tell you. Now den, you set still and behave yoself, and don't you get up agin till I tell you." Tom fretted and chafed a while in a whirlwind of disorganizing sensations and emotions, and finally said, with something like settled conviction, "The whole thing is moonshine. Now then, go ahead and do your worst. I'm done with you. Roxy made no answer. She took the lantern and started for the door. Tom was in a cold panic in a moment. Come back, he wailed. I didn't mean it, Roxy. I take it all back, and I'll never say it again. Please come back, Roxy. The woman stood a moment, then she said gravely. Dat's one thing you's got to stop, valet de chambers. You can't call me Roxy, same as if you was my equal. Chillun don't speak to dey mammies like dat. You'll call me ma or mammy. Dat's what you'll call me. Leastways when dey ain't nobody aroon. Say it. It cost Tom a struggle, but he got it out. Dat's all right. Don't you ever forget it agin, if you knows what's good for you. Now den, you had said you wouldn't ever call it lies and moonshine agin. I'll tell you dis, for a warnin'. If you ever does say it agin, it's day las, time you'll ever say it to me. I'll tramp as straight to de judge as I kin walk, and tell him who you is, and prove it. Does you believe me when I says dat? Oh, groaned Tom, I more than believe it, I know it. Roxy knew her conquest was complete. She could have proved nothing to anybody, and her threat of writings was a lie. But she knew the person she was dealing with, and had made both statements without any doubt as to the effect they would produce. She went and sat down on her candlebox, and the pride and pomp of her victorious attitude made it a throne. She said, Now den, Chambers, we's gwine to talk business, and dey ain't gwine to be no mo' foolishness. In de fust place, you gets $50 a month. You's gwine to hon, over half of it to yo, ma. Plank it out. But Tom had only $6 in the world. He gave her that, and promised to start fair on next month's pension. Chambers, how much is you in debt? Tom shuddered, and said, Nearly $300. How is you gwine to pay it? Tom groaned out. Oh, I don't know. Don't ask me such awful questions. But she stuck to her point until she wearied a confession out of him. He had been prowling about in disguise, stealing small valuables from private houses. In fact, he made a good deal of a raid on his fellow villagers a fortnight before, when he was supposed to be in St. Louis. But he doubted if he had sent away enough stuff to realize the required amount, and was afraid to make a further venture in the present excited state of the town. His mother approved of his conduct, and offered to help, but this frightened him. He tremblingly ventured to say that if she would retire from the town he should feel better and safer, and could hold his head higher, and was going on to make an argument, but she interrupted and surprised him pleasantly by saying she was ready. It didn't make any difference to her where she stayed, so that she got her share of the pension regularly. She said she would not go far, and would call at the haunted house once a month for her money. Then she said, I don't hate you so much now, but I've hated you a many a year, and anybody would. Didn't I change you off? And give you a good fambly and a good name, and made you a white gentleman and rich, wid store clothes on, and what did I get for it? You despised me all de time, and was always sayin' mean hard things to me befo' folks, and wouldn't ever let me forget I's a nigger, n. She fell to sobbing, and broke down. Tom said, But you know I didn't know you were my mother, and besides. Well, nemmine bout dat, now, let it go. I's gwine to forget it. Then she added fiercely, and don't ever make me remember it agin, or you'll be sorry, I tell you. When they were parting, Tom said, in the most persuasive way he could command, Ma, would you mind telling me who was my father? He had supposed he was asking an embarrassing question. He was mistaken. Roxy drew herself up with a proud toss of her head, and said, Does I mind tellin' you? No, dat I don't. You ain't got no 'casion to be shame. Oh yo, father, I kin tell you. He was de highest quality in dis whole town, ol' Virginie stock. Fust famblies, he was. Jes as good stock as de Driscolls and de Howards, de bes dey ever seed. She put on a little prouder air, if possible, and added impressively, Does you, member Colonel Cecil Burley Essex, dat died de same year yo, young Mars Tom Driscoll's pappy died, and all de masons and odd fellers and churches turned out and give him de biggest funeral dis town ever seed? Dat's de man. Under the inspiration of her soaring complacency, the departed graces of her earlier days returned to her, and her bearing took to itself a dignity and state that might have passed for queenly if her surroundings had been a little more in keeping with it. Dey ain't another nigger in dis town dat's as highborn as you is. Now den, go, long. And jes you hold yo, head up as high as you wanta, you has de right, and dat I kin swa.
Karaoke Books.